As promised, here he is, the former president of the Philadelphia Eagles and chief executive officer of the Cleveland Browns. He is Joe Banner. How are you, Joe?
I'm great. Always great to be on with you.
Appreciate you joining. Just really keen about your insight on what do you think is going on right now with the Eagles and Carson Wentz. Best you can suss it out.
Yeah, listen, I think it's clear that they're, I believe they're trying to move him, and at a minimum, they're certainly open to moving him. You know, if you're on a team side, you always want it to look like you're open to moving somebody as opposed to you're trying to move somebody, because it's a better way to position the negotiation. And listen, it looks like they went to market and maybe have been disappointed with the reaction that they've gotten. Or I think we would have seen something by now. So I'm not sure what that means next. It's awful hard to take a guy who's already upset with the organization, have him be aware that at a minimum you're open to trading him and then bring him back. I just can't picture that scenario happening. So I think he's going to end up moving. I'm just not sure when.
So when you're saying Wentz is upset with the organization, I mean, what is that? Because I think we kind of know from afar what's Deshaun Watson's issue with the Texans. What best you can tell is Wentz's issue with the Eagles?
Well, first of all, I think there's some similarities in terms of some breakdown in trust and just, personal relationships, which is never healthy. But, listen, if we're trying to look it through his eyes, he was brought back to a team this year that had a very old offensive line, and their two starting wide receivers were scheduled to be Deshaun Watson and Alshon Jeffries, who are probably past their prime and have had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years. And not shockingly, the offensive line then suffered some injuries. And, the way it went down with him being benched, I'm sure he feels like he was singled out and was identified as the problem as opposed to somebody contributing to the problem. And I think if you're already working in an environment where maybe there's a little bit of a breakdown in the relationships and maybe a little almost silent finger pointing, and then you find yourself in a position where it so publicly looks like the organization has singled you out as the cause of this very disappointing season, I can't think of anybody who's competitive and self-confident that wouldn't have some reaction to that.
So what is the framework for a deal like this? We saw, Joe, the Goff for Stafford trade and the Goff contract that I'm assuming is in the same area code, if not the same prefix as Wentz's trade, and that 2 ones with Goff went to Detroit for Matthew Stafford, and the Eagles, I'm assuming, are not going to be asking for somebody's quarterback back. They just want Wentz out and his contract gone with as much coming in. What do you think the framework of a deal looks like for him?
Yeah, I'll answer you with just one little asterisk. I do think if they make a trade with Chicago, which will be kind of intriguing, I would be surprised if Foles didn't come back to the Eagles and be considered part of the compensation just because of the history there. That's just, trying to put 2 and 2 together, not any inside information, but it just kind of seems logical that they'd want 2 quarterbacks that could possibly start. They wouldn't want to have to use up assets and money or a draft pick to get that. So if it's the Bears he ends up going to, I'll actually be surprised if Foles isn't in the deal.
Okay.
I think the better indication as to what this could be is to look at basketball and baseball, where for a long time we've had trades that were really driven by a team's desire to get out of a financial obligation. And it's tended to depress the quality of compensation that you get back in return. Your main acquired benefit is the relief from the guarantees in this case and the cap. The Eagles would have a huge cap charge in this year if they were to move him here soon. But it would then leave them clear after that. Right now they have $120 million over the next 4 years on their cap, and I think it's about 55 over the next 2 years on their cap. So they could eat a big number this year and then be free. So I personally would think any team, offering a lot would be making a mistake because he's clearly a risk. You can't get the play you saw last year, or it's a terrible move. So you're assuming $50+ million of guarantees if you trade for him. So to trade for him with the risk that he brings, assuming that kind of financial liability and giving up significant draft compensation, as we know, it only takes one team to disagree with what I'm saying, and it can look like a very stupid comment. But if we're just looking at what the fair market value should be, I don't think it's even close to what we saw in the Rams trade. It's really the Eagles dumping a contract and another team willing to take on that contract for any number of reasons, including that they may think he could be their starting quarterback for a while.
And before we move to other topics du jour, Joe Banner, I would be remiss if I did not ask you, if somebody who knows the Philadelphia market as intimately and as you do for as long as you were there, what did you think of Nick Sirianni's inaugural press conference, Joe?
I think it's good that we've seen a lot of instances where somebody was bad at their initial press conference and turned out to be good, because that wasn't the winner. It wasn't the instilling of confidence that you're hoping that your players and your fans are going to see. But I know a lot of people that know Nick, and I think it would be a mistake to project his future based on that, but it certainly wasn't a good start. Joe
Banner here on the Rich Eisen Show. What is the play of the Houston Texans right now with Deshaun Watson? What do you think they're doing? What would you counsel them to do? I'd love to pick your brain on this subject.
Yeah, so this is a really dangerous position they're in, and hard to know how much of it's self-inflicted. You're talking about, I believe, probably a top 5, 6, 7 at worst player, 26 years old, under contract for the next 5 years, at by far the most important position in the game. And right now what we have is a lot of verbal talk and presumably threats, although we haven't really heard it directly from Deshaun. So first thing is, I'm not doing anything with him until I get to the point where I'm truly convinced he's literally prepared to not play versus play for me. Of course, I hope I've got a team in place. By that I mean executives and coaches, that if I can get him in the building and get a chance to show him what our vision is going forward, that he will actually feel at least a little better about at least giving it a chance to see if we haven't, in fact, fixed the problems that he's concerned about, which aren't totally clear. He's blamed it on the owner indirectly again. We're not really hearing from him. At the same time, we've heard reports that he's willing to go to the Jets. So, if there's some political race elements to that, it's not really like he's picking a team that's gone from a very conservative mindset to one that's got a liberal mindset. We're fairly lateral move in that direction. But for me, the earliest I would contemplate trading him is the trade deadline in the middle of the season, and I probably wouldn't trade him unless he sat out the whole season. Now, I know all the negatives that creates with a new coach coming in and trying to establish a new culture and everything like that, but the opportunity to replace him, it's virtually zero. I mean, you got to be very smart and very lucky to get a top 5, 6, 7 quarterback who's 26 years old and whose rights you control for 5 more years. So it'd take a lot more than just conversation and threats before I'm moving a guy like that. Remember, once they move him, it also makes every other player on the team a free agent. Contracts become meaningless because all you got to do is create enough of a stink, and even a great player, a crucial position, can get moved. So you've officially declared all contracts null and void. It's just kind of, if we're still together, this is what we'll pay you. And I just don't know how you can build a franchise that way. I mean, we've seen what happened to Jacksonville once they started down that path. Now they get a new administration. At least gives them a chance to create a new mindset and expectation in the marketplace. But it got everybody who was there fired, that they couldn't find a way to solve the problem and had to trade away players. And those weren't even quarterbacks that make as big a difference as Deshaun does. So I'm watching and begging him to come in and talk to us and at least have a face-to-face about where we've been and what he's upset about and what we can do about it.
But I guess this is the ultimate conundrum here, that stance that you think, or that you would take, or you'd counsel Nick Caserio and obviously Cal McNair, and we're assuming Jack Easterby to take, that it's such a hard stance to maintain. What would be, however, the Godfather offer that you could not refuse, if that would make the option, the seemingly unpalatable option of forcing him to hold out and then trading him midseason, if not after a full holdout season? What would be something you'd accept? Certainly knowing you don't have a 1 and a 2, right? And you're trying to rebuild a team with what? No 1, no 2, and a quarterback who is clearly the apple of not only the locker room's eye, but the entire city's eye, that says, I don't want to be there and I don't believe in the new regime. I don't believe in the old regime. You don't want to build a team that way. What would be the Godfather offer you'd accept to just say, okay, let's move on and do our best to try to replace Deshaun Watson? Joe Banner.
All right, so I'm going to requalify that. I'm not doing this if it's up to me, but here's what I've said.
Okay.
I've said that when it first came up, I said if Deshaun Jackson is traded, it should be the biggest trade in the history of the NFL. So Herschel Walker owns that right now. It's 3 firsts, 3 seconds, a third, and a sixth. And I'm telling you, if I was the Texans, I'm still not trading him until I'm absolutely convinced he's not coming back. But I would need an offer bigger than that. Remember, 50% of the first-round picks and 50% of the quarterbacks even taken in the top 10 fail. So how many picks do I need to use to even possibly replace him? It's a big chunk of what I just said. I mean, I'm going to get awful lucky if I have a top 10 pick, I use it on a quarterback, and it adequately replaces him. That's really unlikely. So in that scenario there, they got 3 ones and 3 twos. I'm probably using 2 to 3 of the ones just to replace him, and I may be getting a top 10 to 12 quarterback versus a top 5 or 6 quarterback. So it would take an offer that would blow away anything we've seen in the NFL for me to say, between the conundrum as you accurately describe it and the level of compensation I'm getting, this may be the prudent thing to do.
I mean, could you compare this rock and hard place in anything you've ever personally been through or witnessed as a colleague of anybody else in management, Joe? I mean, is there anything that compares to this?
And listen, I went through a version of this with T.O., and we stayed firm, and you could argue with hindsight whether that was the right or wrong decision, but that's what we decided to do, and I think it protected the rest of the roster and the team and the principles we'd built on. Probably did create some short-term price for it. But I would understand somebody taking the opposite position and thinking we made a mistake by staying strong. But the impact of the best player in the league doesn't come close to the impact of a top-tier quarterback. So I can't think of any instance, and I can't think of even another sport where we've seen an instance like this. I mean, a Red Sox fan would say maybe Mookie Betts, but I even think that understates it significantly.
Yeah, I guess so. Where were you when T.O. was doing the sit-ups on the lawn? Who called you to say what was going on, Joe? Where were you?
I was in my office, and someone came on and said, you need to turn on your TV.
I might have been on the air, Joe. I might have been the one on NFL Network Total Access doing the live reporting of him doing sit-ups in his front yard in his driveway. Joe, I might have been me.
That's very possible. Very possible. But, yes, I was unaware, and somebody said you need to turn on the TV. And I kind of gave him a look like, do I really need to? Because I knew it wasn't good. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't good. Then I turned it on, and I won't really describe in detail my reaction.
Last one for you, Joe Banner, before I let you go. How do I interpret teams, according to Ian Rappaport, my colleague at the NFL Media Group, how do I interpret his report that teams are calling the Seahawks to kick the tires on Russell Wilson? Why would a team call another for their clear franchise phase? Why would they do that, Joe?
Well, I would call. What do you got to lose? And he has expressed verbally at least a little frustration, and I'd love to know, kind of the question you asked me about Deshaun Watson, is there some, I'm a huge Russell Wilson fan. He's looked great, and I think if he's in a more complex and more creative offense, he'd look even better. So on the long shot, that there's something that answers that question, what would it actually be that could make it worth your while that you'd consider moving him? I actually make that call. I know the odds are it's over in 60 seconds. I got nowhere. They either hung up on me or dismissed me as a fool. But I think he's such a good player and seemingly has a number of years left that I would actually make that call myself. And so what do you get to lose call, in my opinion, for, I think, a really, really top player?
I guess it's the Gretzky phrase, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But
exactly.
But is there like a rumor mill amongst management where you hear, the whispers that he's not happy or something like that? I mean, why wouldn't I call the Bucks to see if Brady's available? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't.
No. Yes is the first part. There is a rumor mill. It's often wrong, so you don't put too much weight in it. But he also, I saw some comments he made in a radio interview. It seemed to be, more about having more input and maybe some frustrations of the offensive line had never really been a priority with the organization. But that's enough for me to just check if there's more going on behind the scenes than, that public comment. And by the way, if Brady would make comments or any other of those top quarterbacks, and I didn't have a top quarterback that made it sound like there was a possibility, that's how the Eagles acquired Jason Peters. He was having a holdout in Buffalo. Didn't seem very tense. It just seemed like kind of a normal, probably short-term holdout. We said, hey, what the heck? Let's call them and just make sure there isn't more under the surface, more upsetness than was getting reported. And lo and behold, they said, well, what would you give us? And then we got serious and had a back and forth and ended up trading a late 1 and a 4 for a Hall of Fame left tackle. So you never know. And when you hear there's a little bit that is tipping above the water. You're not sure how much is below the water. It's worth checking.
So you make a phone call to Green Bay the day after Aaron Rodgers had his post-game comments and losing the NFC Championship game, basically. Is what
I may give it 48 hours just to make sure that there's something there. But yes, I do. And I think teams did.
All right, so all said and done, if you can crystal ball it for me, and I know that's one of my favorite coaching cliches, I don't have a crystal ball. Who do you think gets moved out of the quarterback carousel and all the crazy rumors that are flying right now for a bunch of players?
I think Wentz gets moved, and I think there's a reasonable chance that Garoppolo gets moved, and slightly less, but also a reasonable chance that Carr gets moved. And I think if there weren't 5 quarterbacks that are at least potentially first-rounders, I would say beyond Wentz with even more confidence. But there are a lot of teams that really like quarterbacks in this draft, and that will suppress the trade market a little bit and may keep those last couple of guys on the teams they're on.
Out of all the guys you just said might be moved, Garoppolo is obviously one that jumps out too. Which one would you take, Joe? Out of all of them, which one would you say? Okay, I'll tell.
I would probably take Wentz. I mean, I just think we've seen an upside there that exceeds the other guys. I got to believe in my coaching staff. If I'm making a move like this, I better have a good offensive line. And I think the chances of getting him back to where he was is a much higher ceiling than I think the other 2 guys have. And I don't mean to disparage them with that. It's just a degree comment on my part.
Joe, appreciate our chats always. Look for my texts and DMs and phone calls for the next few weeks as this stuff gets heated up with the new league year almost a month away. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
He's a must-follow on Twitter, at JoeBanner13, former NFL team executive of the Eagles and Browns, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.